Today is a day that all Washington Nationals fans will remember as the MASN dispute between the Washington Nationals and the Baltimore Orioles is finally over. So what does this mean for the Nationals' overall landscape moving forward? It changes everything.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as our show page at LO_Nationals. For all your latest Nationals news and notes, make sure to check us out over on Twitter and look up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcast, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, and of course over on YouTube for the video version of this podcast. And everybody, if you are not aware at this point, the MASN dispute with the Baltimore Orioles and the Washington Nationals, after quite literally a decade plus fight, it's finally over, and the Nationals have been freed after the 2025 season to go find their own network that they will 100% control in the Washington, D.C. market. What does this mean? What are my reactions? This show is going to be all about the MASN dispute, and you'll find out everything that you need to know in this episode. But before we jump into it, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So we get started today with a huge announcement coming literally just a few minutes before I hit record today from Ben Strauss and Chelsea James, the Washington Post. Over, you can catch that article all over Twitter or look up the Washington Post. But I saw this headline: the Nationals, Orioles, and years-long dispute over broadcast rights. So what this means for the Nationals is that the long, just tribulated, just so many damn hurdles to get over with MASN is finally over. And the issues and the hurdles that we have talked about with the Nationals for this right issue that we have discussed, countless times on the show, and the mind-boggling court cases, and they owe us this money. And the Orioles say, no, we do not owe you this money. Look at this contract. D'Angelo sold the team, a year and a half ago at this point? And when they did that, a lot of people speculated that the Nationals could potentially find their way out of this MASN deal. And that is exactly what is happening. Let's read this statement from really what the Nationals and the Orioles put out. And it kind of just puts everything into a quick summary for you. Quote, the Washington Nationals and Baltimore Orioles jointly announced the final resolution of all issues related to the MASN dispute. For the 2025 season, Washington Nationals games will continue to be televised locally exclusively by MASN under a new one-year contract. After this term, the Nationals will be free to explore alternatives for their television rights for the 2026 season and beyond. As part of the settlement, all disputes related to past media rights between the Nationals, Orioles, and MASN have been resolved, and all litigation will be dismissed. It's over. The Washington Nationals are finally freed from MASN. My first overall take with this is the first thing that I thought of is, what is next? What is the next move for the Washington Nationals? Because there's two different things that we could get in with this. Because if you remember, a few years ago when the Lerners first announced that they would explore a trade, then last year, the reason why they kind of took their name out of the market and said, we're good, it was highly speculated. The reason as to why they would not sell is because they didn't think that they were going to be getting their worth for this team. And the worth that was being held back by many, many people, and really just obvious sense stuff here, was the fact that this MASN deal with the Nationals is atrocious. So for years, when Baltimore was first in this market, pre-2005, they had the Washington, D.C. market. They were the Baltimore Orioles, but still games were broadcasted here in Washington, D.C. The reason why that's a big deal is that they were getting all this market, all this revenue from this giant market here in the nation's capital. When the Nationals came into town, that had to get wiped away. But in order, Bud Selig, who's the commissioner of baseball, now Major League Baseball owned the Nationals at that point. And when the Nationals first moved here, Bud Selig just kind of basically threw together this deal, and it basically hindered of what the Nationals could be making. Like when you are in a big market, some of your biggest profits is from your TV deal. And the Nationals here, being a top 7 market in all of baseball, in all of sports, the nation's capital, when you have that big market, you get a ton of money from TV revenue. Nearly 162 games a year broadcasted on your local channels. I don't know what the actual profit is, but it's millions upon millions and just millions of dollars that the Lerners were not getting. This is a huge win for the Nationals now because they now control their own destiny. They can now figure out what the next deal is. Now, it's going to be a little bit trickier than what you think because the obvious answer as to, well, where are the Nationals going to go is Monumental Sports. That's owned by Ted Leonsis. Ted Leonsis, who was also the front runner and what people really thought who would buy the Washington Nationals. It was reported that a offer up to the Lerner's table was simply just not good enough. But now this opens up the avenue of the Washington Nationals getting over to Monumental Sports and being on a local sports broadcasting channel there controlled by Ted Leonsis. That could very much so be in play here. But also think of this. The CBA is up after this year. I fully expect a complete overhaul in baseball. Whether owners try to get a salary cap or a salary floor, or players try to get a salary floor, or vice versa. We could see a totally new landscape in baseball, and not just what you see on and off the field, but what you see on TV. I think at this point, if you aren't up to speed on this, and you might not be, the Bally Sports debacle, where you see all these regional sport networks owned by Bally Sports completely crumbling to the ground. Like the San Diego Padres, for instance. Last year, you could only stream their games on MLB.com. And it wasn't just for the San Diego Padres. There were also some other teams at stake in there. I could see not just the Nationals going over to Monumental, but maybe something that we have not seen at this point. Like the Nationals simply just being on a streaming platform. It's not going to be on MASN. We know that at this point. Or maybe the Lerner family decides to launch their own network and try to get in through that avenue. There's a ton of different outcomes that could happen with this. But if you keep in mind with where the Nationals are today, like what would you think is going to be the next step? I would think that it's going to be Monumental. That's what makes the most sense at this point. But next year, there's going to be, again, a huge lockout, in my opinion. I don't think you're going to see baseball until summer. That's how big of a deal I think this lockout could be. But with that in mind also, where will the games be broadcasted? This opens up Pandora's box for baseball, in my opinion. Because you've got Bally Sports who's going under. Another thorn in Major League Baseball's thigh, that is MASN. Now they're losing the Washington Nationals. What ultimately do they become? Do they want to sink MASN altogether and go to a streaming platform? Do they want to sink MASN and come up with a new way to stream games? We don't know at this point. But one thing that I do think we do know is that this is the biggest win that the Washington Nationals could have had in years. And if you look at it this way, a lot of people have hid behind this MASN shield, the big, tough MASN shield. You can't spend because of MASN. It's a bad deal. The Nationals are in a terrible situation. We can all acknowledge that. And they are losing millions of dollars. But you can't hide behind that anymore. That's no longer a thing. After this season, the Nationals can do what they want. And that is a win for everybody. The people who hid behind the shield and the people who shot at that shield. You can now be in the market of spending once again because you do have the right value for something that is so critical of owning a major team. You need to have the millions and the millions of profit when it comes to baseball. Being broadcasted over 162 games, again, it's so much money. It's stupid money that they make off TV deals. That's why the Dodgers are so prominent. It's why the Atlanta Braves are so prominent. The Phillies, they get so much money off their market. It's a big deal. And so for everyone out there, for the learners, the organization, the fans, and the players overall, this is a huge win today for your Washington Nationals. So let's get into it. I kind of just hinted at what I think could be the future of the broadcast rights. Chelsea Jane and Ben Strauss of the Washington Post they also kick the tires on this of what could be happening with this team moving forward and where the games could be held. But let's have some fun with it. What could be the next step for MASN? What could be the next step for the Nationals and where they go? Well, we'll discuss that after we tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. And of course, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay, because I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps moments of the game even more exciting. And whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is so easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly in a snap. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. This is a big day. Talking about this story from Chelsea Janes and Ben Strauss of the Washington Post that MLB has ended the MASN deal that let the Orioles control the Nationals TV rights. And this is a huge day for the Nationals. You talk about this and what is the future of the broadcast rights for the Washington Nationals? Like, where will they be held? Like, is it going to be a cable network? Is it going to be streaming? The easy string to pull here is to say that they go with Monumental. And I think that is an easy, most likely approach. But I like to zag a little bit. I like to be a little different. And I am different. I think I'm a little weird. It's fine. You can be weird. I think the Nationals are going to go with something completely different that we do not even know about. I'm not saying that they're going to launch their own app. I'm not thinking that the Lerners may even launch their own network. I think that Major League Baseball is going to step in. I don't even know if they have this authority, but they are going to step in and get rid of all these regional sports networks and launch and be the first professional sports league, one of the top professional sports league, to launch everything on a streaming platform that we have to pay for. Now, is that most likely? I don't think so. I think the most likely outcome is that they will end up on Monumental. And that would be a big win, by the way. Because one thing that I remember, and thing that you probably remember 2019, pre-pandemic, different times. Dan Kolko, Bo Porter, being on the platform there, outside section 102. You don't get that anymore. You don't really get real TV coverage pre and post game like you once did. Now, is that MASN and the Orioles cutting costs? Yeah, that's really what it is. But you don't get that anymore. And that part is a real issue as far as Nationals games go. I missed like the real authentic pre and post game show that you saw Dan Kolko and Bo Porter, and even before that, Johnny Holiday holding down the fort there. I miss those things where you'd have Nationals fans gather outside Section 102 over a win or after a loss, whatever it is. I miss those days. And a lot of Nationals fans do as well. This opens up a world of possibilities of where the Nationals could be. So, the future of the broadcast rights likely lie with Monumental Sports, if you just had to bet. And with that in mind, I also think that opens up streaming, because Monumental Sports, they do have streaming. You can stream the Capitals, and you can stream the Wizards. And it's also on YouTube TV, by the way, which I have YouTube TV. I can finally now watch the Washington Nationals if they do end up on Monumental after the 2025 season. But this could not have been a better news story to come out of this week in spring training. You now have 3 straight spring trainings of 2 years ago. The Lerners announced that they would explore a sale. It was kind of like, whoa, that kind of came out of nowhere, but it was like, okay, let's see what happens. Last year, they announced that they will not be exploring a sale anymore. And I think we kind of all knew that at that point. And now this year, you announced that the MASN deal is now toast. And the dispute is over. And what I've been telling my friends is that the Wicked Witch is finally dead. But get back into the broadcast rights and what this could mean. I was just talking to one of my buddies before this because I was just reacting to it. And I was kicking the tires on it. And we both said that Monumental Sports is the likely destination for Nationals broadcast rights. It makes most sense. Ted Leonsis has built that empire up. He's done a good job with it. I think Monumental Sports is pretty solid overall. Number one, he has wanted to buy the Washington Nationals. And really, he's obviously is a sports fan, has embraced the DC area, so he wants to buy the Nationals, of course. And he wants to be in on this. But with that in mind also, is he wants those TV rights on Monumental Sports. To have 3 of the 4 major teams on your network is a huge deal. Profiting, 82 games in the NBA, 82 in the NHL, and then getting another 162 in baseball. They're going to have to come up with a 3rd channel for some of these things. In seasons where, for instance, this week, when you have spring training games, and when you have hockey games going on in the NBA, you're going to have to come up with some different ideas and probably a 3rd channel with Monumental Sports. But I think that's the easy kind of thing to do here, is that you expect the Nationals to get to that point where they're going to be on Monumental Sports and you're probably going to like it. But as I was saying earlier, I do think this upcoming offseason is going to be a huge one for baseball. And not just something that I think is going to be big for the Nationals. It's going to be a big landscape change for Major League Baseball as a whole. And what I mean by that is that they are going to totally overthrow some rules and requirements in baseball that you see today. Like, we could see the possibility of a players union standing on the table for maybe a salary floor. Maybe it's a salary cap that the owners wants. Who knows what they would want at this point? But I also think a big deal in that will be the owners wanting to get, and really this is more so of a owners and Major League Baseball kind of issue, but totally overthrow the regional sports networks and maybe launch their own app. Like you see out there, for instance, Hulu. I believe Hulu broadcasts like all Major League Soccer games here in the United States. You could see something like that with baseball. Now, I don't think it would go to an app like Hulu. I think there would be an app that they would come up with, like the MLB app that they have already. You could see that, and maybe you just have to subscribe to that, and there'll be a much cheaper option than whatever you pay per year. Like, what is it, $300? They end local blackouts so that You can watch your teams, you can watch them on national TV. But I think baseball, one thing that has really hurt them overall is that they have always been behind the eight ball. They have never been out in front of something. I think one thing that I'll give Rob Manfred a little bit of credit for is that he has changed the game. Like, for instance, with the pitch clock, that was a ballsy move that he did. And it changed for the better, in my opinion. And now they're trying out the new ABS system, which I hate, by the way, but it's a new ballsy thing. I don't think Manfred is going to be afraid, let's say, if Netflix comes in and offers a boatload of money to try to broadcast these games and have each individual markets have their own subdivision of Netflix and have it be like Netflix DC or Netflix Boston or Netflix Philly. Who knows at this point? But Manfred has been the one commissioner in sports who has really stuck his neck out and has done things different and has changed some things in his game for what has turned out to be the better in some cases. So that's why I'm not totally shocked if they do eventually just throw the RSNs out the window and go to 100% streaming for your baseball games. That is my idea, and that is something I would not be surprised with overall in the coming years. So thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And of course, catch us over on YouTube. Just search Locked On Nationals, and that is where you'll find your daily YouTube content of the Washington Nationals. Next, what could this mean for ownership with the Washington Nationals? MASN has held back the owners for quite some time. The excuse is gone. Would they try to explore a sale? I'll answer that after this. Thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And actually, the Washington Post and Chelsea Janes and Ben Strauss discussed this in their story today. But I do think, and I'll just kind of give you my opinion before I share theirs, but I think that this does change things with the Lerner ownership group. I do think that this might change the Nationals wanting to sell again someday. And this is what the Washington Post, and more specifically Chelsea Janes and Ben Strauss, had to say about it. What was not immediately clear was how regaining control of their broadcast rights would affect the Lerner's long-term view of ownership. At the start of the 2022 season, the Lerner family announced it would explore a sale of the team. At the time, Leonsis made a bid of more than $2 billion. The Lerners did not accept. And the Lerners announced that they were taking the team off the market, and people familiar with their thinking remained convinced that if someone made an acceptable bid, the family would still consider selling. Control of television rights could entice someone to make that bid, or it could further convince Lerners to hold on to the team with access to a revenue stream they have previously never controlled. And that is basically what we have been saying here over the course of these last 25 minutes, is that this could mean two very different things. This means that you might have Mark Lerner and the rest of the Lerner family have 10 toes down here in Washington, D.C., and they are now ready to build another contending team by having their full revenue and getting a new partner, a new streaming partner that completely changes the landscape of how you just take in Washington Nationals baseball. But this also just means maybe they finally get the bid that they think is worth it. Because when I talk about the Lerners and what they do, one thing that I think back to was this was, I think, maybe like almost a decade ago at this point. They were going to sell the stadium naming rights and have it not be Nationals Park, which, by the way, they should still do today. But we'll get into that at a later date. They were going to do that at one point. I forgot what it would have been, but they ultimately decided not to because they thought the price that they were going to be getting wasn't worth it in their eye. But don't you think the businessman in you, wherever you are deep down, don't you think that getting one, let's say someone's like, here, I'll give you 50 cents. I'll just give you nothing. Well, actually, that was a bad example. Let me take that back. Let's say I'm going to have a candy bar here, and I'm selling it for $1. And someone's like, and I don't want that candy bar, by the way. It means nothing to me. I'm allergic to chocolate, let's say. Someone's like, well, you're selling it for $1, but I'll just give you 75 cents for it. And I'm like, no, I'll eat it later. It's like, well, you don't like chocolate. You're not going to eat it. You're not going to sell it. Just overall, main point, I've used terrible examples here, excuse me. But just make the deal. That is what we have been talking about with these naming rights and all the whatever you talk about with the Lerners here. But I do think that now having MASN out the window will completely change what you think of the Washington Nationals. Again, this will change the Lerners' kind of viewpoint of not wanting to sell the team, but also this may change their view on how they kind of operate this team. And if it doesn't, then it's time to have a conversation. So as I sit here today, on March 3rd, I feel rejuvenated. I am thrilled. I am excited for what is to come. Because the years and the years of just honestly really bad TV overall with the Nationals is finally gone. And unfortunately, this is Bob Carpenter's final year with the Washington Nationals and MASN. So the Nationals are going to be going into 2026 with a totally new broadcast team. We don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be Dan Kolko? I don't know. Is it going to be Kevin Franson? We don't know. It's not going to be Bob Carpenter, though. This is going to be his final season. And ultimately, this is going to be the final year on MASN as well. Which is sad because I'll miss the jingle of MASN. I love that thing. But also, good riddance. It is finally over with the MASN lawsuit and whatever you want to call it. The Wicked Witch is dead. Thank you all for making Locked On Nats your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm sure on tomorrow's show, we will get some more details as rumors come out of what could be happening. So we'll discuss that and more on tomorrow's Locked On Nationals. Until then, I'll catch you on the flip side. Have a good one. Go Nats.